Hello and welcome to another episode of the Midierror Meets podcast, where we speak to all kinds of people who work within sound and music. On the show this time we've got Millie Chowles, who is a radio producer. She's a presenter and journalist who's worked on a myriad of radio stations. She has a really profound story of her own, which we briefly touch on, but you can research if you'd like to, relating to trauma and addiction, which is one way that she got into radio presenting, and her love of it has grown, and she's now working for Radio 1, BBC Radio 6 Music, and a lot of other places. I do make this podcast completely by myself from my bedroom, so any support is greatly appreciated. A lot of time and effort goes in behind the scenes. There's now over 60 hours of conversations, and that represents a really small proportion of the time I've put into it. So any support is greatly appreciated. But let's get on with the show. The first thing I asked Millie was about her musical beginnings.
My earliest memories of music are probably I inherited a record collection, just a small record collection from my sister, who's about 13 years older than me, and my stepmum, who I think is about 20 years older than me. And I just loved these records. I had a little record player, and there were a couple of tunes in there. There was all sorts. They were all like compilations from like the 70s and early 80s, basically. And there were a couple of tunes there that I really loved. And the one that stays with me is it's an old sort of Italo disco track, really weird, called Bumblebee. Oh, sorry, it's called Ladybug, and it's by Bumblebee Unlimited. And it's this crazy Italo track with this kind of weird, sort of sexy sort of seduction between two bumblebees, all done in sort of like crazy little falsettos. So it's a really, really weird track, but it's got an amazing riff, and I just loved it. I was like obsessed with this record, and I used to play it all the time. And also because it was a bit sexy and a bit weird, I also sort of felt a bit like, oh, I hope no one hears me listening to this weird bumblebee sex story on a record. So that's one of my earliest memories of music. And there were all different kinds of, I don't know. I mean, it's just that I had these records and they were mine. And I loved kind of like exploring them, and also just sort of singing in the car, I guess, along to my mum's Fleetwood Mac and Elton John and the Travelling Wilburys and people like that. Yeah.
Amazing group. Yeah, you don't really hear people talk too much about the Travelling Wilburys nowadays, but like what an amazing super group.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was very much my my parents' vibe. So yeah, they were.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't thought about the Travelling Wilburys for quite a while, but there you go. Maybe I'll dive into some of their back catalogue tonight after this.
Yeah, I think it's always good if you said you inherited some record collections. That's always quite a wondrous thing, isn't it? To just go through them yourselves and yourself and just pick through these colourful things and choose the ones that you like. Yeah, what other tracks sort of stood out on those compilations that you mentioned, like the 80s and the 70s ones?
I mean, I'm thinking Blondie, Hanging on the Telephone. I remember absolutely loving that. So I had all these kind of, loads and loads of weird, loads and loads of sort of compilations. And the way the compilations was there'd sort of like be one section there was people like Dexy's Midnight Runners and all these sorts of old 70s bands that, I mean, I guess I was really young at that time, so I didn't even really know what was happening kind of musically, like in the time that I was living. But I just loved the fact that they were my records and that I could explore and listen to different things every time. I'm trying to think of tunes that stood out. There were like some quite sort of cheesy sort of disco tracks like DISCO and things like that. And I liked Dexy's Midnight Runners. I remember that, and that Italo one. And then I also remember sort of being given smash hits compilations and Top of the Pops compilations as I got kind of older, I guess, but still like this is still like pre 10 years old. So yeah, being given smash hits albums and that's when I suppose I started to get a bit more into electronic music. You'd sort of hear things. I remember, I think like the first electronic track that I really remember just loving was Black Box, Ride on Time.
Yeah.
And it was in the charts, and it was and I remember seeing it. There was like a Saturday morning kids program. I'm really aging myself now. I'm dating myself, but that's fine. And there was this Saturday morning kids program, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was set in like a fun fair. And I remember seeing Black Box performing Ride on Time on this kids Saturday morning TV. And I remember saying, I love this track to my dad and my stepmom. And they were like, oh no, it's awful. That is awful. And I guess, yeah, I sort of fell in love with that sort of sound from there. And then that kind of progressed, I guess, to when I was sort of at secondary school, getting handed down. I mean, I got really into indie music before I got really into electronic music. I was really into bands, and like the more obscure the better. I was a real kind of geek from a really young age, and I would buy all the music press. Like at age 11 I'd be getting like Melody Maker and NME and sort of geeking out about Nirvana and but yeah, people who else, I mean people like Pavement, Sonic Youth, and all that kind of 90s grunge, shoegazer, slacker, that kind of stuff.
That's brilliant.
And yeah, I got really, really into that. And then this is still really, really young. This is still when I was like 11, 12. And then I think around 12, some older kids were going to kind of raves that were local to us. And I wasn't old enough, obviously, at 12 to be like going off to a rave, but you'd get these mixtapes coming back from like Fantasia and Universe. And there were a few mixtapes from that era that really, really kind of changed the game for me. And one was Sasha, Universe, 92, Return to the Pleasure Planet, which is just still one of my favourite mixes of all time. And I loved that mixtape. And me and all my like 12-year-old girlfriends all learnt all the words to every single tune, and we'd like sing it. And I had the cassette, and then I can remember like a friend of mine nicked it, and then I managed to like get another cassette, and then another friend nicked it, and then it was sort of lost for years until later, until quite a while later when I kind of found it again on the internet. And there was like a Tony DeVitch track cassette that I remember being given and absolutely loving, and I've sort of searched for that and I've still never found it. It was amazing. Wow. Top Buzz and
yeah, wow.
Top Buzz, and who else was it?
I had an amazing tape.
Slipmat and Top Buzz. That's it. A Fantasia one, which I loved, and yeah. So that was Sorry, you were saying.
No, that's incredible. I've literally I've written down like everything you just said, because there's like stuff that would be great to talk about on all of them. Let's first of all go to Ride on Time, which I think was out in 1992. I think it was 1992. Do you reckon that's about right?
Yeah, I think it might be early. I think it might be 91.
Okay.
But yeah.
Because I remember that song as well, and just hearing like a vocal sample that was clearly like being played, like. Like where there's like a repeating section where the vocal gets cut, but it's repeated. And I remember my, it was such an amazing sound. It really worked with like a big soulful vocal to have that sort of repeated pattern. Huge tune, that one. Massive piano riff as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I remember I remember just hearing it's like, oh, this is the sound in Europe now. This is like the sound of like all, this is this new sound coming over from Europe, and just thinking, wow, that's so cool. And also I think I loved the fact that my parents hated it. They were just like, oh no, this is awful.
Always helps that.
So it was such a it was such a sort of deviation from the Travelling Wilburys. They were like, oh no.
They were talking on the radio yesterday. Sean Keaveney was talking on the radio yesterday about like translating phrases that are popular now with children, having to like translating them for the middle-aged audience. And I remember, and he was saying, oh, what you should do, you know, as a middle-aged person is repeat these phrases to your kids, you know, in context all the time. They're going to love that. And it's a little bit like that, isn't it? When you're younger, you've got like a lingo between you and your friends. And then if your parents start using that lingo, it just destroys it.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, like I feel like for my generation, I sort of always think it's quite funny because I think obviously when I guess I was a young teenager at the beginning of the 90s. So I was basically 10 in 1990. So it's easy to and then sort of 20 in 2000. So like that was my whole teenage era.
Same with me, really. I'm only a couple of years off.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I guess electronic music was very new at that time, but it's not now. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like, so for example, like, so, you know, I've got a child now and I sort of think, oh, what's he going to be into? Like, is there anything that he could be into that would like horrify me? And I doubt there is. I don't know, but maybe I'm sure that he'll find a way to find some music that horrifies me in 10 years time or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember my dad always used to say like, oh, this rap music all sounds the same to me. And I could sort of get what he meant, but I would sort of try and explain why I liked some rap music. And I just always remember him like literally not being able to differentiate rap songs because it all sounded the same. So I guess you may find yourself saying that to your son, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's not many, I don't know. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You can't sort of see yourself in that role of like, because I feel like I'm still very open to all kinds of new and experimental sounds. I can't exactly imagine myself going, but you know, I guess, you know, there's 10 years of that. There's 10 years before I have to.
Yeah, I'm sure you're very cool.
Be really old and close-minded.
Switch off to all things.
About music.
Yeah, well, that's amazing that you say about Tony DeVitt. I do remember some amazing tracks by that guy. I think I do have a couple on vinyl, like The Dawn, which was probably later on in his career. I think there's a story that Tony DeVitt gave his whole record collection to Fergie. You know the DJ Fergie? He was like a Radio 1 DJ. There was a story that I remember hearing like 15 years ago, and it's obviously like probably pre-internet days, so it could have been a total lie. But somebody said that Tony DeVitt gave his entire record collection to Fergie, or maybe left it to him after he died or something. Also, Top Buzz as well. I had a really great mixtape by Top Buzz. I can't remember what club night it was from, but yeah, you mentioned Top Buzz, and yeah, straight away I was like, oh my god, I remember that name.
Yeah, and there was a track on there, and actually a couple of years ago, like Mum Dance did this like top 10 happy hardcore tunes you might not know about from the early 90s or something, and there was like my standout track on this Top Buzz tape was I'm going to attempt to sing it because there's no other way to like describe it, but it was like Beverly Craven. This is very obscene era. No, Beverly Craven singing, "It's 4:00 in the morning and it's starting to get light." That was, that's why I'm not a singer.
That's wonderful.
And but it was like really, really speeded up. It was like this song 4:00 in the morning, and yeah, I loved that for some reason. I just absolutely loved that. It was like, yeah, and it's by Orca. I found out. I never knew who it was by at the time. It was just a track I loved on this tape, and then I found out that like Mum Dance picked it for his like top 10 happy hardcore tracks.
Amazing. Yeah, Mum Dance is brilliant. I think he's from Brighton. Yeah. He's from where I am, I think.
Yeah, I love Mum Dance.